Don't you think it's time for the city of Savannah to have an honest tourism management plan? That SCAD start paying its fair share? And the hospitality industry needs to increase its wages? The impacts of new growth should not cost residents. All local elected officials on council and commission should have term limits. We're working hard to accomplish these policies. We need your help. Please contribute whatever you can, $5, $10, or $20, by going to bettersavannah.org. Donate. Thank you.
Savannah needs additional tourism. Savannah needs additional tourism.
I mean, I appreciate our tourism community. I appreciate our hoteliers in particular.
The following show and broadcast is a production of Better Savannah, an independent expenditure committee dedicated to better policy outcomes at the state and local level. The views, opinions, and statements made by the hosts and/or their guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Better Savannah.
What's up, everybody? It's another Thursday. It's a back-to-back recording session for John and I. We just had a really great conversation, although I think we'll talk more about this afterwards. I think we may release this one first and then release our conversation with Terry Tolbert that we just had a little while ago. John, it's Father's Day weekend. You got rained out in Atlanta with the baseball game, huh?
Yes, we did. My son Taylor and we went up and had a great time, but we didn't get to see the Braves play. But that's okay. There'll be more games, other dates.
Yeah, of course. And apparently, buy your tickets direct and not from StubHub. Is the lesson learned from this weekend.
Yeah, live and learn.
Live and learn. Live and learn. Well, we got a great show for you guys tonight. Kind of got like a dual listening series, is what I would call them. We're gonna take a listen in to the podcast from Adam Van Brimmer and Gannett at Savannah Morning News, the Commute, from their episode this past Thursday, which focuses on the city manager, kind of crime, police, economy, but we'll focus in on the city manager part because, John, we had some real big news in the last week, right? We had 3 finalists announced for the city manager of Savannah, one including our assistant city manager, Keith Lloyd. And you immediately came out with a post, congratulating, congratulating our new city manager, Keith Lloyd, because it's likely obvious that that's going to be the choice, given the 3 finalists, at least in your opinion. Let's start there, and then we'll work our way into the podcast.
All right, just don't say the word kabuki.
Right, correct. Yeah, I mean, again, it's unfortunately that the common phrase is no longer acceptable. I could see lately that some of our audience wants to battle semantics rather than the bigger overarching policies. So, we're going to stick with the bigger policies here on the show, obviously, and not try to debate the little things. So let's move into the city manager thing, John. Again, we talked about it, and you put that post out there. It got a lot of traction immediately.
Yeah, surprise.
Surprise.
A couple thousand views without
just a matter of hours.
Without boosting, spending money to push it out.
Correct.
It just found a natural, organic home, and people responded to it. So
I saw the comments, and the comments ranged from you guys this is pretty racist to single out the only black male candidate, to if you look at some of the shares in the comments, I mean, I'm not going to name any names or share any names, but I mean, I see a lot of people going, yeah, he was a horrible boss to work for, or he had this, and this when he was over this department, and so I think that there's mixed messaging out there, obviously, as it should be. Obviously, John, you and I don't care about Heath Lloyd's race. We care about somebody who has 16 years of high-level experience inside, entrenched in a city government that has clearly been failing for those 16 years, and what that means for their political nature in that role of city manager as chief executive officer. I mean, obviously, that's where the thought was coming from, right?
Yeah, and I just want to add a little solace or perspective to this. What we've been at it now for almost 2 years, and we're reaching 35,000 people a month. So when I notice, once you get up to kind of a tipping point, you become a much more attractive target for sniping and nitpicking, and
of course, just spurious random comments that don't add anything to the conversation. But we deal with it. It's only going to get worse when we reach 40 or 50,000 people a month. So buckle up, Buttercup. I know, right? All right, so let's start here with this episode of The Commute, where Adam Van Brimmer speaking with City Talk columnist Bill Dars, longtime opinion, basically two longtime guys at the paper here in Savannah. And first off, I think we want to start with the premise here that 10 months ago, Adam Van Brimmer said, both in print and on this show, his podcast, Savannah would not be able to attract quality candidates because of the Keisha Gibson Carter and the antics on council. Is that? Do we have that premise right, John? Can you expand on that before we go into this?
Sure. To appease some of the more politic in our audience, leaving names aside, the divided council, the division on council, however you want to PC say that, Adam Van Brimmer steadfastly maintained was the death knell for this next search round, that people would just not want to come here because of this divided council.
That's right.
That we were forever blackballed as a place that any smart person would want to come and work. So, yeah. What do you got for us?
Just stop me when you want to add the thoughts. All right.
Right.
It feels like to me that something good has to happen, though. I mean, we're now, approaching the second half of the second year of the term of this city council with, a new mayor and lots of new mayors
put together during Barack Obama's administration. So certainly we have some candidates this time that have pretty impressive resumes, pretty impressive credentials.
Yeah.
I talked to the mayor yesterday, on Tuesday rather, and he basically said, I feel pretty confident we're going to get a city manager out of this bunch. But as you kind of look over, and we don't have a lot of details on these folks yet, but as you kind of look at this situation, is it premature for us to be optimistic that this, after 2 years, may finally be drawing to a close and we're going to get a new city manager?
I think it is perhaps too optimistic to just assume that's going to happen. Just given the the divisiveness among city council, I don't know how you could feel confident that the mayor's right and that something good will happen here. It feels like to me that something good has to happen, though. I mean, we're now.
Okay. So there's Bill kind of reminding him of the old line that Adam had a year ago, right? That hey, there's so much divisiveness on council. Are you sure you can be optimistic that something good is going to happen, given what the history is? And Adam seems to have forgotten that line, but Bill doesn't.
Well, Bill too, back when Adam said in the last city manager search, what was that, 5 months ago? Bill said, "Oh, we're doomed. This division on council." He basically echoed what Adam was selling, and now they're both doing a 180-degree turn and exalting the search company, the candidates, and the whole process. I want you to notice that neither of these individuals have the capacity to say, wow, we really got it wrong 4 or 5 months ago when we said it was hopeless. We're surprised as you are. Something. It's just amazing to me that they can be so wrong and march ahead as if they didn't have it wrong.
Well, it's a classic example of trying to have it both ways, right? They want it to be, we couldn't get good candidates because of these women on council, but also we got good candidates and something good is going to happen because of the mayor's leadership or whatever they're trying to sell in any given moment. Like they'll just switch on it, because it's gonna support the argument.
It's the flavor of the day, or what works for them at the time. I'll say this about Better Savannah: we're practically dogmatic. We do have some gaffes, and I'd like to think that we own up to them when it happens. But as a continuum, it'll bounce around 180 degrees. The one thing that I personally, Chuck, have bounced around on, especially after talking, with you and Terry Colbert, is the fire fee. The fire fee was a good concept that was poorly designed and dreadfully rolled out and implemented.
It was a concept designed for a scalpel, and they took a cleaver, right?
Yeah.
Like if they had, I remember what I was saying. I was like, if they had said, okay, guess what? Churches with property under this amount of value will pay $100, and single family homes will pay $1, and multifamily homes will pay $25. And then all the commercial properties, like including SCAD, will pay a fair share. Like a lot of people would have just accepted that as, okay, this is the tool used to be able to balance the playing field.
I'm sorry I drug us down this rabbit hole of the fire fee. I didn't mean to do it. I just wanted to illustrate the fact that
it's a great example.
Yeah, time is a filter for which certain things become clearer or certain aspects become obvious that weren't initially. So, we're only human, but these guys don't ever go back and say, you know what, heck, golly, gee whiz, we were dead wrong. So it's just a personal peeve. Go ahead.
All right, let's listen to this next part.
Approaching the second half of the second year of the term of this city council with, a new mayor and lots of new members. And they, as I said in a recent column, I feel like they need some wins. And one of the wins they need is to get a solid city manager in place so that they can pursue other parts of their shared agenda. They all ran on similar platforms and want to do similar things, they say. But they really need, a permanent city manager. Michael Brown, Pat Monahan, I think have done great jobs as interims over the last couple of years, but They need somebody who can come in with a full commitment to work with them for the next 2 years and then beyond, presumably.
All right. So I, when he says they say, I think that's the critical line right there. That's the critical phrase.
How so?
Because he goes, they all ran on similar platforms. They all want to do the same things, they say. And I think that's critically true, Bill Dars, right? Okay, people did run on these same platforms, but they are governing in a way different than when they ran. And that's the story that you guys don't want to write about. You don't want to write that, all of this council ran on impact fees just about. You don't want to run the fact that Van Johnson in the last debate in the general election finally agreed to a financial audit, a fiscal audit, after Regina Thomas running on almost purely that issue alone for the previous 6 months. And we have yet to see any form of a real independent audit of this city government in this first 2 years. Now, of course, COVID, we're going to have excuse after excuse. But again, I'm just saying, it's about your narrative. If your narrative is let's protect the status quo, you'll do all this misdirection stuff. But I just don't think that they're wanting to write a better narrative than is available to them. Go ahead.
Well, the only thing I want to unpack or take away from the clip you played, and I think there's a heck of a lot of truth in the comment, and that was, hey, they need some wins.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was Bill's column like a week ago that he's basically referencing, and it was a very kind of mixed, even-handed column. There's a couple things I didn't like about it, but there was a lot of things that I thought were pretty fair as well. So they do need some wins. There's a quote from an alderman, I'm not going to say who, recently that said, if they were all up for re-election today, all 9 of them probably lose. You know, and that's saying something. So I do think that there's a lot of room for improvement, and I think a lot of voters are going to give them a pass for not accomplishing a whole lot when 95 days in your term you have a 100-year crisis, once in a 100-year crisis. I mean, I think we understand that, but I think what he's saying is that the runway is running short now.
Exactly.
Right? The COVID runway, this plane is taking off from COVID. Okay. We got to fly this plane between now and the next election cycle, or else people are going to crash. That's what he's previewing there.
Well, setting aside the aviation metaphor, because you'll probably get Brian email for that one. The point of it is they don't have a whole lot of accomplishment, and COVID certainly gets them a pass up until a point. And this is where Dowers and Van Brimmer astutely, correctly say, man, they're going to have to deliver on something. Now, I'm sure we're going to hear in a little more in these clips what that is. And it's not exactly what I had hoped to hear. But nonetheless, let's trudge ahead and get to it.
Let's see it.
Search priority, and that was his.
And they, as I said in a recent column, I feel like they need some wins, and one of the wins,
going all the way back to.
I'm confident. What catches your eye from among the 3?
Van Johnson talked about wanting a gamer, right? We got into that whole thing last fall. He wanted somebody. He talked about this going all the way back to when he was running for mayor. When he was in our offices, we were doing endorsement meetings, and he was asked his search priority, and that was his first and only priority at that point was, we can't do anything else, which kind of gets to what you were saying, until we get this person in place, because this is the person that really guides the city. I don't know that a lot of people understand how vital or how important that role is in our form of government. The city manager is the chief executive of the city. The mayor and the city council they set the vision, they set the agenda. It's the chief executive that executes on that. It's just like a CEO in a corporation. You've got a board of directors that kind of talk through and review your work and kind of give you direction, but ultimately it's the chief executive that has to execute on it. I think it's the same thing in Savannah. So Mayor Johnson, or at that time, Alderman.
All right, so I want to pause it here because this is the metaphor that I used in the conversation with Terry. Okay. And I want to apply exactly what Adam Van Brimmer just said there about this being a corporation that's the chief executive officer and they implement things. All right. So when you have pressure on one of the chief department heads that reports to that city manager, from the public, from the workers, the employees, from everybody, right?
At the city, and in the public, right? It is your job to put pressure as a council, as a board of directors of this corporation. It's your job to put pressure on that city manager to fix it or get the person who's responsible gone. Yeah, let me suggest some shorthand. Yeah. The mayor talks to his colleagues on council. Yes. They collectively decide they're not happy with the way Chief Minter has handled these most recent problems. Once they kind of have that consensus, someone, preferably Van, goes to that chief executive, Michael Brown, the city manager, and says, "We've talked. We're not happy with the way Minter is handling this. We need you, because he reports to you, to make some changes, get some action, put something together that builds confidence." And these are conversations they're supposed to have in executive session. Now, John, you served one term on the county commission. Okay. Yeah. At the time, the police department was not merged at the time, right? Not yet. Not yet. It was before the first merger. Okay. So, is this not something that would, you would Billy and you guys would be in executive session with, who was it at the time? Who was the county manager back then? Russ Abel, right? Was it not just an understood concept that, look, if this department head is screwing up so bad that we're all taking political pressure on it, Russ, you're going to fire this person. You're going to make changes. Well, short of firing, Chuck, some recognition of responsibility or accountability is that intermediary step that we're missing right now. That's not happening. And this is what, to their credit, what Dowers and Van Brimmer have correctly identified is a growing suspicion and unhappiness with the very top. And I mean Chief Minter. Look, I want to say, I'll put it here on the show because I know that Adam knows that I'm a critic of him at a lot of times when he writes things that I think are grossly wrong. But I put this in the town square. Look, man, you're on a roll lately, Adam. Please don't stop. Yeah, good work. I mean, the last out of your last 10 editorials, you're hitting 56%, man. And I mean, that's enough to get into the Hall of Fame in the major leagues. So I would welcome that percentage of good editorials to that continuing. I have one other comment, Chuck, on the clip you just played. Yes. That was the gamer. Yeah. Oh, we got to talk about that. I mean, it's so Van Johnson to say that publicly, number one. And that's it should show people kind of Van's an establishment player politician. He's really good at it. Doesn't mean he's evil. Doesn't mean he's, personally responsible for the crime that is ascending right now, right? It just means Van is a gamer himself in the political world, and he wants somebody in that role who matches that speed of things. And that typically, in our viewpoint, would lead to business as usual, right? Well, yes, I wasn't going to go in that direction. Where are you going to go with it? I was going to say that I made the notes. Soundbite. Van is one big collection of sound bites. Okay. Well, that's modern American politics. That's modern American news. Well, Okay, but we don't, in this autocratic term of this council led by Van Johnson, the ultimate autocrat. Are there any sound bites from Nick? Are there any sound bites? He gets some. I mean, you don't watch the 11s probably as much anymore. I mean, if I would say Nick gets the most sound bites out of anybody other than Van. All right. I mean, there's definitely some media loving there. How often is Dietrich allowed? to make a
Well,
sound.
look, I mean, Dietrich's live on Facebook from the scene of the crime on almost everything anyway. So, I mean, he's getting himself out there via social media. I'm not sure how effective that is long term, but it is. I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, I think Van, who I don't know how often, if you've ever counted, he comes into my news feed either in the daily paper or on the nightly news, or 5, 6, 7 times a day.
Well, look, I'd like to think that probably 15% of that is the algorithms built by these networks, John. But I will tell you that sentiment. I mean, we are not an island here. We have friends on all sides of the aisle, all sectors of this city.
True.
Business owners, workers, union members, all the above. When 1,500 people are watching the show, it's going to be a good cross section. Okay.
No doubt.
The number one thing I hear from people when I mention the mayor was, well, he sure does like the attention, doesn't he? He's always in front of a camera, isn't he? And look, I think if you are trying to have an ascendant portion of your political career, I keep saying this. If he's planning to run for Congress, now's the year, man. I mean, you got to strike while the iron's hot, because Regina waited, Floyd Adams waited, and they were not successful. So if that's the goal, then I think it's all logical what he's doing. But if his goal is to be an effective 2-term mayor,
well, I'm sure we're going to bump up into this commentary from Van Brimmer and Dowers about the task forces.
Yes,
and they're being held out to be the holy grail to produce some of those wins that are so necessary right now going into the second half of their terms. So play some more. Let's go
here.
Johnson was like, we need somebody in here who's a gamer, who has experience, who has thick skin, who has the ability to really drive a large organization, 600 some odd people strong in the city. Actually, it might even be bigger than that in terms when you kind of pull in police and fire and all the other departments, but the direct city government's about 600 people, I think. And if you don't have that person there, then the organization tends to founder. So from what he was saying, and then what we saw last fall, where we had 3 candidates who all were either deputies or their experience as a chief executive was limited to a startup city in a very brief period of time, which was, Odie Donald, who ended up in Augusta as their equivalent of a city manager. Those 3, none of them fit that mold. And I think that's really kind of what led to the division and the infighting amongst council. Was nobody was really confident. Nobody inspired enough confidence among all of them to bring them together. This group seems to have at least. I'm going to focus on the out-of-towners because I think
I just want to stop it right there before he goes about the candidates real quick. Is that Nick Palumbo went on news media and blasted Odie Donald for having the gall, the American dream of applying to more than one job at once. Okay, I mean let's remember that. All right.
Okay.
He blasted this guy for being a finalist in 2 cities. So again, guys, let's hold the goose and the gander on the same level here. If it's where's that accountability for what happened there? You had 4 people by record of public statements: Bernetta Lanier, Alicia Keisha, Alderman at Large, and Estella, I believe, who were going to vote for Odie Donald as city manager. So, I mean, that's a plurality of the council. It's not a majority, and nobody else wanted to join with them. And not only did that, one of the other members of council went out in public media and blasted the guy for just having the tenacity and to make sure he's able to support his family and his career. Ridiculous.
Yeah, there's something that just occurred to me, Chuck, that back during that search, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Van Brimmer and to a certain extent Dowers essentially said, we have solid candidates that can't find a majority, and it's the council, the division on council, that is standing in the way of us taking the next step of hiring someone. Now, listening to what they're saying, they are faulting the candidates. Once again, they have flipped in my opinion to it that it wasn't council's fault any longer, which it was 5 months ago in a big way. Oh, it was the dissension on council. It was the 4 African-American women.
Right.
They're messing up this search. How dare they? Now we're hearing a different tone, and it's that the candidate selection was weak, and that's why they couldn't decide. So again, another point of ambiguity and inconsistency from the journalists that
let's hear this next portion.
People know Heath Lloyd, and Heath Lloyd's background's a little different than the other two. Is these two folks from Cincinnati and Washington? They just have a broader depth of experience, and I think that in itself is going to appeal to this city council. I also, from what I understand, the way the search went was the search firm basically did somewhat of I don't want to say an algorithm, but they did an assessment that was more scientifically based. You know, they ranked all of these candidates on a variety of different criteria to come up with a number to try to find a fit for what Savannah wanted. And so you at least have that. And from talking to some folks that are involved in the process, they said that they feel that the finalists this time, they feel a lot more confident with the finalists this time than they did the last time, where it was, you know, it was a little more informal. It was more anecdotal. You know, we like this person, or this person did this. You know, now they have some metrics to go with it. That said, they still got to come in and interview. And I know that they've talked to all of these candidates already over the phone or Zoom or however they've been doing it. But when they come in for the in-person interviews, that's going to be the real test. And as we saw last time, nobody really passed that real test. Will any of these three, especially the two coming from out of town, will they pass that test next time? And
all right, so before we go into that last clip, because I know what he's about to say next, I just want to say that, you know, I think that to say that these three candidates are drastically better than those three candidates were 8 months ago, 7 months ago, however long it was, I just think it's flat out false. The guy from Mesa, Arizona, Kalua from California, and even Odie Donald himself, even though he had only been a city manager for a year and some months of a new city, you know, we're all still relatively qualified to lead a city this size. You know, these people seem relatively qualified to lead a city this size. You know,
there's not a world of difference between.
Maybe they're slightly better qualified. I can see that argument, right? But to make it like there's this universe of difference, I think is just kind of grossly unfair. Let's listen to this next part.
Okay.
So Van Johnson has said he's willing to hire somebody on a 5-4 vote now. The last time he said he wanted 9-0, but he would have settled for 7-2. Obviously, we've got two factions on the council now who don't seem to really agree on much of anything, at least anything of high profile. So if it comes to 4 of them want this candidate and 5 of them want this candidate, will that 5-4 carry the day? And will they be able to move forward with that person? I think that's going to be the real test. Is can one of these candidates inspire more than 5 people to support them? And if not, how does the 5-4 split? How does that kind of carry through with the hiring process? And how does the eventual hire then try to win over the other 4?
Yeah, and you know, given they do look really strong on paper, and given the different process that would, one hopes, find 3 stronger candidates that would be more broadly acceptable. You know, I could imagine a situation where multiple members of council find multiple candidates someone they could vote for. And, you know, and that's where, you know, you just hope at some point, just a spirit of sort of compromise and discussion that council could kind of come to a consensus. Even if they walk into the room and it looks like it's 5-4, maybe they can hash it out. And maybe the person who was going to get 4 votes would end up getting more, if they're able to sort of talk through the strengths, the weaknesses, the fears, the concerns, the hopes for the various candidates.
I don't know. I don't know what council, he's been watching when he says that there's going to be some process where,
Yeah, that's detached from reality.
This first year and a half of this city council has been an exercise in raw power. And people who have been involved for politics for both years and newcomers have seen that it only matters who has the majority, and even more so, if Van with the veto power. I mean, it's really about having 6 members of council if you don't have the mayor. If you don't go along to get along on 90% of the majority, you're gonna be lucky to get 10% of what you want.
Chuck, it's business as usual, man.
That's it.
If you don't have the stomach for dissension and articulation of differences on policy and things that are critical to changing the trajectory of this town and its politics, then you're a business as usual person. And that's what I hear Dower's lamenting, is the fact that we might have to have a divided vote on council. Well, again, 6 months ago, we heard repeatedly from these guys that, no self-respecting candidate wants to go to work without a majority or at least a supermajority vote to hire. Well, all of a sudden now it seems like this is acceptable.
And where's your criticism of that type of governance at other levels? Bill Dowers, you worked for the paper when they endorsed Donald Trump, dude. Where's your criticism for that type of governance at the state, federal, county? I want to just stop on this 5-4 thing real quick. Okay. Van Johnson voted to hire Rochelle Small-Toney on a 5-4 vote. Okay. Yeah. And the school board over the protests of Jolene Byrne voted 5-4 to hire Ann Levette. Right. Okay. So that seems to be part of our history, and we've gotten here just fine. Why all of a sudden that's a change this last year or two? It's that precedent Eddie Deloach set when he hired Rob Hernandez, John. And this is, I can't prove this, but this is a true story. Okay. Eddie Deloach said, I will have a 9-0 vote on this hire. What do you want in return? And I know for a fact that Estella and Van and them, they made some deals, bro.
Yeah.
Stephanie Cutter got a retirement package that was acceptable. Yeah. Not that she hadn't earned that in some regard, in my opinion, John. I mean, she did give 30 plus years to the city.
She was already compensated in a pension.
I'm not saying that she wasn't, but I mean, I'm just saying, there was a package given to get her to get a respectable exit, like another candidate, like Rob Hernandez got. He got a respectable exit too. He got paid a severance to leave too. So that's kind of like the cost of doing business argument with me, John. This is a small amount of money we're talking about. It was done as a political deal. So that precedent being set, Van doesn't want to give the other side anything. If Van would reduce the rules package of 5 votes to 3 votes in exchange, honestly, he might get a 9-0 vote. He might get a 9-0 vote for the city manager. Don't you think that's possible? If he said, look, I will give you agenda access at 3 votes on the pre-published agenda. If you give me 9-0 on the city manager, I'd make that deal.
Yeah, if I was a member of council, I would.
Yeah, if I was in the at-large position and I've been shut out from the agenda because it takes 5 members to get something on the pre-published agenda, which is ridiculous, I would make that deal. So, Van, I know you watch this show. Send that out. You know who to call, the opposition there. Call them. Yep. Make that deal, man. You want a 9-0 vote. That's the way to make it happen, because that's exactly what you did with Eddie. So, let's stop acting like politics isn't greasing the wheel. This guy refuses to grease the wheel, John. He refuses to give a little to gain a lot. And that's not sustainable generally in politics. Okay.
No, Van is, we use this word a lot, Chuck, transactional. And
he used to be.
Well, as mayor, he has not been.
He is not.
He's been autocratic.
I imagine with the majority, he's probably transactional. But I mean, at least as a, he's not a free market guy. Like, he's got his market of 5, and that's the only ones he's transactional with. And he's just embargoed the other side. Yeah. Chuck, those don't historically work in history.
Work with me here. What do you think Van is? What's his worst fears about letting Keisha, Alicia, Bernetta, and Estella get stuff on the agenda? What is he?
I'll be fair. Let me be fair here.
Okay.
Probably about 20% of the fear is that they will guck up the agenda with stupid stuff, stuff that's not, it's going to make the meetings take so much longer, blah, blah, blah.
I get that.
I'm a little sympathetic to that. I understand where he would come from if he said that that's part of it. I think 75 to 80% of it is protecting him and his members from taking tough votes. It's Mitch McConnell controlling what goes on, what is voted on in the Senate and what isn't, right? Yeah. It's just the Mitch McConnellization, because, Van wants to vote on impact fees that Bridget Liddy has developed, right? But we want to vote on the Sandy Springs plan, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a difference, right?
No, Van wants to play a game on impact fees and
yes, very much so.
We passed them. We gave you what you asked for.
It's not what we asked for.
Except what he's done is he's miniaturized impact fees into a insignificant, unimportant little thing instead of.
He's made impact fees a tax allocation district. That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah,
and it's ridiculous. As if people who buy a house in the burbs aren't going to enjoy police protection and a new fleet of police vehicles that can be paid for by impact fees instead of SPLOST funds.
By the way, the cost of those impact fees are built into the purchase price and part of your mortgage. Come on.
Why are we so concerned about the cost of luxury and upper class housing and not focused on the crime and quality of life for those of us who already live here?
Yeah.
That befuddles me over and over and over. This city manager issue is going to play out over the next 10 days. We're taking a break from live shows for kind of the next week or two here. You're going on vacation. My birthday's coming up. We'll still have content coming out, guys, I promise. But, we're just kind of pre-recording stuff that we think is going to play out over the next week or two while we're going to be on this hiatus. And this is obviously going to be the biggest thing of them all, probably, as the city manager. So this next weekend, and I'll be there as well, will be the interviews publicly for these city manager finalists. And, John, presumably, they'll try to meet an executive session within about a week or 10 days or so after that, right?
Yeah. While we're on the subject, do you have that crazy list?
Let's pull it up. Yeah. So, after the city manager thing came out, John, you put together this list of questions for these 3 city manager finalists. So I've got them up here on the screen.
All right.
First question: do you support returning access to the agenda for all members of council? Obviously, a great question, John. This is not a question. If I'm in their shoes, why don't you ask me these questions and I'll answer them if I was in their shoes? Because this is kind of how I think this would go. If I'm a finalist answering that question, okay, I'm going to say, hey, look, I support trying to implement the vision of all members of council as much as possible. The rules of council ultimately are up to the members of council itself. I will work with all members of council under whatever rules they pass, because ultimately it's a political decision, John. City manager has no say-so in that decision. It's all Van and the council that decide the rules of council, including the agenda.
No,
so,
that would be very politically correct.
You'd have to give that answer. Why would you give any other answer other than something other along those lines?
Yeah.
So ask the second question, John.
What is your explanation for why Savannah has 28% poverty after 30 years of prosperity?
Well, you're going to answer this somewhere along the line of, the port expansion got delayed by many years. There were economic drivers that happened, including 9/11, 2008 financial crisis. That you would just basically point to external factors. Okay, you and I both know that's bullshit.
We're going to have to do this on a lightning round basis, and your time's up on that answer.
Oh, yeah, it's too long. Yeah, go ahead and punch back on it.
I'll tell you the right answer. Objectively, is Heath Lloyd ought to be able to answer this. The other two should say, I would have to study up to give you a great answer on that.
What's the answer Heath Lloyd should have?
I'm not signing up for the job, okay?
I hear you, buddy. Hey, it's $240,000. It's good money, man.
Yeah. All right, lightning round. Do you support impact fees on all new construction citywide?
I mean, obviously, yes is the right answer to this question. Some people in the comments of this were coming. This is not me answering the question. This is just me talking, John. Like, the people were coming in the comments about, well, how can you do impact fees on, affordable housing development? Yeah. Do you know how much of that is happening? Slim to none.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly willing to carve them out too, guys.
Exactly.
Let's be realistic here. Okay, we're talking about all construction citywide. That is not in the categories that we want.
Yeah,
right? And if we have to spell that out for you, I think that's a problem.
Yeah, and believe me, I'm personally much more desirous of impact fees on these huge freaking hotels than I am.
And we're going to get 5 or 10 more of in the next 7 years. Yeah. All right, next question.
All right. Will you ensure the police department includes visitors, SCAD students, and homeless populations in its staffing level?
I would say not only do I think we should include the visitors, SCAD, and homeless, we should include the rest of the universities, including Georgia Southern and Savannah State. We should include a certain percentage of the capacity of Hunter Army Airfield's full-time population, and of course we should be considering the visitors / tourists, because remember, it's both. People who come in from Effingham are a visitor, just like a tourist is a visitor.
Yeah. I want to make a quick point before we move on.
Let's do it.
Okay. On this, to get to 3 officers per 1,000 people, if we were fully staffed, which is another subject of discussion of why we cannot retain officers and get to our full complement of 525, but to include these populations, Chuck, on top of our budgeted 525, we're only talking about 75 officers here, okay? And it would make, I think, a huge difference in community policing and building back the department. Okay, next question.
All right. I just want to point out, let me just connect to one other thing here, okay? Remember that 2 pennies on the hotel motel is $6 to $7 million a year, okay? All right. Do you know our 75?
No,
2 pennies.
It's not over 10 years. It is. It's an extra 6.7 million per year.
That's what I'm saying. It's 6 to 7 million per year, John. Okay. 75 police officers times average cost of $85,000, which is training, everything off the door. Which is probably slightly lower. I'm being a little high there. Do you know how much money per year that is, John?
No, how much?
6.45 million. Just want to point that out. I just want to point that out before we move on. What's the next question?
You should be city manager, Chuck.
I hear you.
All right, finance director David Maxwell.
New resume, buddy. Yeah. I'm kidding, David. I love you.
Will you hold the police chief accountable for failures of policy within his personnel and department?
Oh, well, I think, the political answer is going to be, I'm going to have to review the policies and the actions and but I mean, the obvious answer has got to be yes. Yes, you have to hold people accountable. They report to me, ultimately the buck, I want a city manager is going to say the buck stops here, pal.
Absolutely. Okay. Will you ask CETA, the Savannah Economic Development Authority, to be transparent and agree to independent audits of their development contracts?
So, again, if I'm answering for me or for Better Savannah, I'm like, yes. Not only that, I would relay to the leaders of Savannah Economic Development Authority, its CEO and chairman of its board of directors, that if they do not agree to independent audits of development contracts, I will recommend to the city council that they begin the process of repealing the enabling ordinance legislation within the city code of Savannah that gives CETA the power to negotiate on our behalf.
Chuck, all they have to do is suspend it until the transparency happens.
I mean, honestly, let's just be real here. If they just put it on the agenda, this would happen. It would just happen overnight. As soon as they got on the agenda, they would yield. They would have to.
Not to belabor this, but two quick points. Every other major cities with the Economic Development Authority does this. This is a best practice in the industry. Why we don't do it runs along the same line of questioning as why didn't we have impact fees 15, 20, or 25 years ago? Okay. Second point is what's going on in the background.
I'm just pulling up the other video for what we do next.
All right, let's go to the last question.
This is the last question.
Do you support beginning discussions with SCAD and the port to develop a pilot fee program?
Yes.
Fees in lieu of taxes.
No, I mean, yes, payment in lieu of taxation.
Yeah.
It's an agreed upon, practice. It's a great practice all over the country.
Yeah, the right answer from a city manager candidate is, by all means, we are
wherever possible. Now, I would say, if I'm in their shoes, obviously, I'm going to say, look, Georgia Ports Authority is a state authority. We're going to have to work with partners at the state level to ensure that happens. But whatever I can do in the role of city manager, I will do. Because look, I think we both know, John, port container fees are just not going to happen unless the state does something. It's just not, they don't have to. We don't have any reason to compel them to do it. I mean, if we start running fire operations up and down the river to delay the boats all day, every day, it's not going to go over very well, very long. We're going to get Chris Christie on that one. So of course we want them to support this stuff, but hopefully out of all of these things, John, impact fees and the SCAD pilot fees are probably the most attainable. I mean, the agenda should be, but I mean, even that's probably less attainable than the other things.
Well, thanks for playing along.
Absolutely.
I just thought those were pretty fundamental things. I know there's some of them are very hard questions, but since this is the time and the place, we're looking down to 3 people as candidates. Those are the questions that I would ask.
All right, so let me pull something else up over here for our back half segment of the show here.
Tell our ride-alongs where we're going.
What'd you say?
Tell our ride-alongs, our audience, where we're going.
Yeah, and then, again, for those who are listening on, podcast platforms, be sure to try and check out our show on Facebook or YouTube. So, John, I just pulled up. This was a post you put up. Oh gosh, this was a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is courtesy of a blog in Savannah called Savannah First Timer. We did speak, in the comments section with the owner of that blog. We'd love to have her on at some point.
I'm going to meet her tomorrow night. She's.
I hope that. Yeah, she's doing. You're doing a tax seminar tomorrow. Gosh, I forgot about that. Property tax appeal seminar.
She's signed up for it.
Is it at the Thomas Square? Is that where it is?
It's for the Thomas Square neighborhood.
Right.
It's at Sulphur Studios, little conference room upstairs.
All right. So, we put this blog, we pinned this blog up, and, we sent it out to about 8,000 people in the Savannah area on Facebook. I was surprised when I read this too, John, because when I think of crime in Savannah, I've been here 10 years. You know, I think of East and West Savannah generally, right?
Right.
You know, I kind of think of the Tatumville, Liberty City kind of crime and the Waters Avenue kind of crime. Like those kind of two things like immediately. Those are what jump into mind. And it's 10 years old now. It's in the Southside.
Mostly.
Right?
Yeah, over half.
Over half of the shootings, or is it murders? Is it the homicides?
It's homicides.
It's homicides. Over half the homicides have happened in the 6th District on the South Side. Clearly, this is striking a nerve both with the public and with the elected leaders because, as we'll see here, 6th District Alderman Kurtis Purtee had a town hall about crime a few days ago. Okay, was this Thursday night? I think it was.
Yep.
Okay, so this is a week later, and for context, you know, we had this mass shooting, you know, this retaliatory shooting against
Saturday.
I think it was Wednesday because it was right before the town hall, right? It was either Tuesday or maybe it was Tuesday night, and then they had that chase that ended, you know, in a death. I think, you know, officer involved shooting with GSP through the middle of town right before this town hall started. So I'm just gonna play a little bit of this. I've got a couple markers that I've got saved around, but let me get familiarized with the video again real quick. Notice
this is Purtee's 6th District.
This is 6th District's at Georgia Southern's Armstrong campus. And before I start playing, this graphic is up the whole time during the event. So this first line, and the you can't see it because of the light right here, but it says, here it is. When I change the light right there, when I change the timing, 30% increase in homicides in 34 U.S. cities, 34% increase in murder in 57 municipal locations, and 2020 was the highest rate of gun deaths nationwide. Now, this third one, John, is so misleading. John, do you know why gun deaths? Do you know why last year was the highest rate of gun deaths? Do you know why?
No, tell me.
Suicides.
Okay.
One of the most despairing years. Okay. When they say that gun deaths, that includes suicides. Okay. So, you know, 2020 actually, because of the amount of stimulus money, poverty went. Do you know that in the second and third quarter of last year, poverty went down in this country? Right?
Well, yeah, stimulus money.
Yes. Government support. Turns out if you give people enough money to survive, maybe they won't kill each other. Fascinating, positing theory there.
Yeah, let me say one thing. All of these 4 things are correct. However,
they're correct like in their unique way, like siloed off by themselves.
Well, that's where I'm going with this, Chuck. This is without local ideas or concepts or best practices to address these things. This becomes 100% equivocation, a political equivocation to say, I got to eat. The murder rate is going.
Okay. This goes back to my Facebook post, right? That I shared this in our members group a week and a half ago. And the post was something like, anytime a politician says, well, this is a unique situation, or we're a unique city, we're a unique district, okay? And I don't remember where it is in the video, but Kurtis starts with the 6th District is unique.
Yeah.
And it's just like so telling of like, it's basically like an admission of there's not a lot we can do about this. And it's sad.
You know what, Chuck? Even if you don't have ready-made pret-a-porter best practice ideas and concepts, you can at least say, we're going to work on it. We're going to find the answers, which I don't know how much of this, I don't think we have time to play it all, but trust me, you don't get much of that. You get a whole lot of equivocation and a little tiny drop of we're going to try to do better, which is my biggest complaint with it.
Well, I don't think I can pull it up. I don't know if I can find it or not, but it reminds me of you know that movie U-571? It's like a submarine movie.
Yeah.
I can't remember the actor's name, but Matthew McConaughey is the skipper and the chief engineer. He goes, this The skipper always knows what to do. Even when the skipper doesn't know what to do, the skipper always knows what to do. You know, like you should never like just lead off your discussion with a euphemism for there's really nothing we can do about this, but let me listen to what you have to say anyway. I mean, that's kind of the attitude that one could gather from that type of admission.
Well, he didn't. He started out with "We're unique," which is one grade above. We don't have a clue.
All right, so let me get into this. I'm going to skip around until I find the first piece here a little bit. All right.
Community program, while we're here today, and then we'll pass the mic over. Thanks, Linda Waller, Brian from Service.
So, okay, all right. So the first part before we get into these clips. This is starting to feel a little like the Eddie DeLoach show tour with his 5 on council and every major person in city government. Remember? Yeah. So we were talking about the fire field a little bit earlier. And you remember like all through like 16, 17, and 18, we were just like going to these town halls. And it was Eddie DeLoach, Brian Foster, Julian Miller, Bill Durrance, and Carol Bell. They'd always show up and it'd be them 5 together. And it was like, I said it at one point to you, it's like a show of force, It's like a show of like, well, look, we're the majority on council. What do you want to do about it?
Yep.
And this, I'm starting to see that as the pandemic is ending and live events are beginning, you got 4 members of council. You got the mayor, 3rd District, Linda Wilder Bryan, 4th District, Nick Palumbo, and then the host is 6th District, Alderman Purtee. And even, I think, Alderman Purtee even says that, Dietrich wanted to be there but had to be somewhere else. So I just want to point that out. In addition to the council members that are there, the district attorney, Shalina Cook-Jones, friend of the show, friend of the committee, we love you. She's there. And I think, probably independently, she felt the need to be there with what's going on.
Very appropriate.
Even though her office isn't yet involved in some of the, we got to get these people caught before we get prosecution.
Yes, she's just proactive.
I understand. And, the head of the Housing Authority, Earlene Davis, is there. Obviously controversial for all sorts of other issues. Our last week's show was on the Weeping Time 2 weeks ago or a week ago, that you went out to that vigil. You got the chief of police there. You got the deputy chief of police. I think the deputy city manager is there. It's just kind of just this big show of, hey, we've closed ranks. We're all here. We're listening.
I'll close it for you, Chuck. COVID's over. The wheels are coming off the freaking car, and it's all hands on deck.
All right, let's try to listen in here. All right. So the first clip is there's this wonderful lady basically acknowledges that this is going on.
I have a suggestion, actually. Okay. When I lived, which was in Pennsylvania, but our policeman always walked a beat. Mm-hmm. We knew who the officer was and where they were facing, where you could go to them. Now, I know the Southside, it would be because we don't have sidewalks everywhere.
Yep.
But I think
whose fault is that?
Those little carts that they bought for the masks to catch the people not wearing masks.
Okay.
Why can't the police?
So like a little utility.
Right.
So what she's saying, John, is that these little golf carts that the city had for COVID response. I mean, you and I both live downtown. Yeah. We see this a lot, being down here. There's these little like gator carts or whatever.
Golf carts, man.
They're a little more powerful than golf carts. Like,
they don't have lights and sirens.
They do have lights. I don't think they have sirens. They do have lights on them, though. No, I've seen them with lights. No, it's like a full like gator utility vehicle. Like that's like a brand of them. So she's saying like, why can't we have them riding around the South Side? Because COVID's basically almost over. Yeah. Like, what are we going to do with those resources? I thought that was a really good idea. Let's listen some more.
Okay. Around the South Side, because to be quite honest with you, I mean, I see the cruisers. I have no clue who covers the Southside. And sometimes I feel like we're blown off because someone just put the statistics. 50% of the shootings were on the South Side, but yet we're told we can't get the shots off.
That's my frustration as well.
Okay, well,
That's my.
All right. So obviously, to whoever you are, fam, thank you for sharing our content. I'm sure that you probably saw it because a lot of people saw that post, John. Almost 8,000 people saw that blog post. I'm sure that lady's traffic on her website probably been through the roof the last week and a half. That she can corroborate that in the comments when this gets published, I hope, because I think it just is awareness, like bringing it to people, like all the resources for the police department are generally deployed downtown, right?
Yeah, to Kurtis's credit, when she says, why can't we have spot shotter out here or cameras? And he says, ma'am, that's my frustration too. Well, the follow-up question should have been, well, Mr. Purtee, Alderman Purtee, aren't you in the majority of the politics of council? I mean, why are you frustrated?
I think the follow-up question needs to be, what are you willing to withhold from the mayor in order to get that?
Well, that would be.
You were voting with the mayor 95% of the time, 98% of the time, whatever the number is.
Well, why doesn't Kurtis just go to the mayor and say, man, I'm getting crushed by my constituents. I got to deliver some cameras and some spot shotters. Help me out. Do me a solid.
Well, what's funny, here's the thing, okay? At the last clip, I'm going to connect this to the last clip because later on, one of the police commanders starts talking about how, we need the add-ons to ShotSpotter. Let me find that. Let me get the number. That's at 144. Let's play this clip here because I just want you to listen to this police commander talk about how it's basically the basic ShotSpotter is not even enough, right? Like it's so frustrating. It's like they move the goalposts on us, John. You know what I'm saying? Like every time we get close, they just move it.
Yeah, a Ford isn't good enough. I got to have a Lincoln. Yeah.
All right. Listen to this.
As far as point blank, but to address what you brought up earlier today, the software ShotSpotter.
I love these.
The software ShotSpotter actually has another component that was launched on March 18th, which is Connect. And Connect actually allows for the data that's collected to be disseminated and predictably answer the question as to whether the next shots are most likely to take place. And that information is being used by our social services aspect. So we can bring out resources that help those areas preemptively to stay off the possible shooting.
Okay, let me tell you exactly what that reminds me of, John. That reminds me of like 2005 when the Iraq War was starting to go really bad, and there was this big debacle over the Humvees, and we hadn't up-armored the Humvees, and people were getting killed in roadside bombs. All these guys in the military getting their legs blown off because we hadn't paid to up-armor these Humvees. Yep. What good is ShotSpotter for the last 8 years that we got sold on this system if we never bought the software to read the data? That's what he's saying. We just got this in March. That's what they just said.
Wow.
He's saying we just got this in March. It's called the Connect upgrade. It's to read all the data so that it can predictively analyze where we should be deploying our resources. And it's like, what did we get sold 5 years ago, 6 years ago? And that's my point about them. They always move in the goalposts. It's, we just got this new software and we just got this new Band-Aid. There's this new Band-Aid, to me, that's the frustrating part about the public discourse.
You said it.
Yeah, it's just so frustrating. So, I appreciate this lady sharing her content. I'm glad people are responding and getting in to, the public arena again as COVID ends, because it's going to be the public, especially district by district. And I just want to take us back to a political prediction I gave you privately a while ago. So, I said that Kurtis would be the most likely swing vote among this council.
Right. Because,
his district vote is 65% for Eddie DeLoach. Okay.
Right.
And, this alderman has chosen a political path that has made him close to the mayor that his district did not vote for. That type of relationship has to have some nuance, some balance, and it most definitely has to have some bring home the bacon type of dynamics to it, right? If you're going to be close to the mayor of essentially opposite what your district voted for, you got to be showing something to your district that justifies that type of relationship politically and support politically for the votes he's taking. Because, this is a guy who was questionable about the arena, questioned the arena, and has voted everything for the arena. This is a guy who was for impact fees, for term limits, and is so far been slow to get those things going. Yeah. And it's mostly just going with the agenda that is presented by staff. As if this staff didn't get us where we are.
Kurtis Purtee hitched his wagon to Van Johnson.
It's okay.
And that's fine. But to your point, the Southside is a very fickle district. Call it unique, whatever you want.
Sure.
And they're not easily fooled or mollified. Okay. He's got to deliver. Personally, Chuck, if there's anybody that doesn't run again in 2023, I think it's going to be Kurtis. I think the job has extracted a huge toll on him. That it was much more. It was extra than he envisioned.
That's a common theme, though. Bill Durant said the same thing. Maybe he was just saying that because he got his tail whipped by Dietrich Leggett in the last election. But essentially it said, it's a lot more full-time of a job than I ever would have thought it was going to be. And I'm sympathetic to this issue, guys, okay? And the solution is to raise the salaries. Terry Tolbert would make an amazing mayor or council person, right? But the thought of people of that stature and that, them subjecting themselves to this for years on end. It's not really, you got to make it economically incentivized, I have no problem doubling the salaries of all the aldermen and the mayor. I just don't. Okay. And anybody who says they do is basically saying they enjoy crappy government, because that's what we're getting.
And they obviously have no idea that we have close to a $500 million budget.
Sure.
The two budgets.
Absolutely.
I'll wrap up my comment on Kurtis and just say, I think he's a great guy. I think he's the real deal, but I think he's stuck in the doldrums right now, Chuck, coming out of COVID, crime, off the chain, and his constituents are starting to put the pressure on him. So I think let's watch and see how he responds in the next couple months to all these post-COVID pressures that are cropping up. And who knows, he might find his own independent voice and path and surprise us, which it would be
very healthy for city government if he did. I think it really would be. And I'll just say this because I'm sure you catch the show, Kurtis, and I'm sure people will send this show to you. We're both from Michigan, man. You're only a couple years older than mine. You're from Flint. I'm from Detroit. You know how these establishment politics go. We've seen it in our home state, ruin that place and kill so many people in your hometown with the water crisis. You don't have to vote 98% with the mayor. Not asking you to vote 0% with the mayor. That's not what we're asking you for. But you should be able to find some compromise between both of these factions. You are definitely a solid left of center political guy. You know, you're a good representation. I'm thankful you beat Tony Thomas. I really am. He was an embarrassment to the city. He's a certified pedophile. You know, I mean, you know, it was good riddance.
Alleged.
I understand. He was a certified alleged pedophile. That's fine. But understand that, you know, the future is still coming, and we still got to govern for the next decade. I'm tired of. I don't expect you guys to lower the crime rate now. The things you do now are about the crime rate 5 years from now. Okay, you know, the decisions you're making now are about the crime and the poverty years from now. So I am not expecting you guys to solve this crisis overnight. To be perfectly honest with you, John, I'm surprised it took this long for the crime to pop up. I think a lot of that has to do with the economic stimulus from the Trump and Biden administrations back to back in the last 12, 13 months. Okay. But I want to correlate a couple of things that are live right now. Okay, John?
Okay.
The eviction moratorium ends in 2 weeks.
Right.
The unemployment benefits, the plus up unemployment benefits, which, again, shout out to Adam Van Brimmer for saying that was the wrong solution. Agree with you 100%, buddy. You know, that unemployment plus up ends next week. This upcoming Friday. It's the last one.
Yeah.
Right. So there are economic pressures that are coming into play, right? Inflation is up across the board. You know, I mean, a piece of plywood costs 2.5, 3 times what it did a year and a half ago. Okay. You know, there's a lot of these economic pressures that I think are coming to play all at once. And while we've had a K-shaped recovery, you know, and what that means for people is that the people at the bottom, their situation gets worse. People in the middle and the top, their situation gets better, right? So, you know, the people at the bottom, you know, of the economic ladder, you know, are generally more likely to commit these crimes. You know, that's always been true. Okay, so I think what I'm saying here is that we shouldn't expect this to get any better, any quicker. What we've got to start doing now is making decisions to reduce it 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Chuck. And I think what you're really forecasting is there's a lot of turbulence just over the horizon. So, you know, prepare for it. I'll just say this. I'm not, and I'm sure you're not saying Kurtis needs to align himself with the other side, with Keisha and Alicia. That's not the right move, Kurtis.
I don't think he's ever going to. I don't think it ever happened. You know, I just don't think it's politically viable for him at this point.
Where he needs to go is on his own as an independent. He needs to be a Bernie Sanders or, you know, give me a famous independent.
Angus King from Maine. Angus King.
Okay.
That's actually the best parallel too, because Angus is like kind of basically a former Republican, kind of independent who caucuses with the Democrats. Like, it's a very good comparison there. Let me just let me say it the way I think you're trying to say it.
Okay.
He'll deliver more for his district if he gets an independent streak.
Absolutely. He could be the swing vote.
Okay. Like, I can remember saying this to a couple of these council people, John. I'm not going to name names on this one right here, but let me just say it this way. I can remember telling these people, hey, don't sell short. Don't sell easy. You got a 5-member majority. That means any one of you are the 5th vote.
Right.
That means you should be able to extract. So, like, for you to say, that's my frustration that we can't get ShotSpotter here, even though I think the whole ShotSpotter Connect thing that we just showed, I think there's some version of theater there, you know, some level of theater, there. But if you're not in a position to demand that, why are you voting with this majority all the time? What's the value to your voters by doing that?
Yeah, well, he's new, Chuck. He's new. He's finding his way. He's got a good heart. He's a hard worker, but he needs to just break out a half step and stand in as an independent on a lot of issues, and he'd be marvelous.
All right, let me get this Shalina Cook-Jones piece in because we're obviously big fans of the district attorney. So let's listen into this.
All right. Stop talking and start doing. As citizens, elected officials, and government leaders, we have suffered from analysis paralysis too long. And that is why our office has agreed to step up and create, through the hard work of Michael Edwards, Christian Stahl. Y'all go ahead and stand up because I'm smart, but I can't take all the credit. His team, they're not here just for window dressing. As of today, the district attorney's office has established its ROC unit. What is ROC stand for? ROC is the district attorney's racketeering and organized crime unit. We will have our first initial meeting next Thursday at 6:30. We expect, for all of you who are recording and streaming, we expect every elected official, every law enforcement chief, every community activist, every pastor of the faith community, everyone who is interested, who has an interest, every organization, every civic group who has an interest in addressing this issue, we want to see you next Thursday. Because we expect not just to talk, but to give out assignments about who's going to do what. How are we going to develop a response team to answer these kinds of critical shooting incidents, mass shootings, running gang problems, as soon as they occur? Who's going to do what? Where will the extra manpower come from? What do we know about what's on the street?
So, Shalina is responding, District Attorney Cook-Jones is responding kind of immediately and has reformed a ROC unit, which is, RICO and organized crime, which, again, most of the gang-related shooting activity tends to follow the drug trade. We're a port city.
Yep.
And while we know from our interviews and debates with Shalina, she will, prosecute with discretion for kids who are wrapped up in their first offenses, but getting the leaders of these organizations kind of off the streets is definitely going to put a dent in some of the violent crime. I want to point out, because this isn't just words from Shalina. I was very proud of her this week. I hope you see this episode or listen to this, Shalina Cook-Jones. You back this up the next day in the paper on Friday, John. They're asking for $285,000 in increased budget from the county for 2 more assistant district attorneys. That's backing up words with actions. Okay. Yep. And I want to give another shout out. Mentioned in that story, pushing for it at the county commission, none other than Better Savannah endorsed candidate and actually guest on our first ever episode, Sixth District Commissioner Aaron Whiteley.
Yep.
A. Whiteley is the commissioner pushing for this, per the Savannah Morning news article on Friday morning. Okay, so this is real action. I want to commend her for stepping up, not only just attending that meeting, but I think these were things that were already in motion before that shooting happened, John. Right? That means it's proactive. They didn't just do that in response in 2 days, right? That was already rolling, and this thing happened, and then they pushed it out publicly.
Yeah, Shalina Cook-Jones, from the jump, has been all about policy and innovation.
Yeah.
And that skews to criminal justice reform and, justice. It's her MO. She hasn't deviated from it. And I've said, I think in prior posts, that she is a role model and inspiration to our other local governments. That
I think she's a great voice and leader to unify, hopefully, multiple levels of government, because it's going to take both strong prosecution of leaders of gangs and prosecutorial discretion for kids in gangs, right? It's going to take both of those. And Shalina's got both of those to a good, strong degree. it's going to take a city government with policies and economic development that focuses resources towards the bottom. And it's going to take a better school system. And I want to this is the next clip that I want to play. It's, let's see, 1:30:07 here. I'm gonna get it pulled up here, John. This is just a very critical point from, one of the audience members, just kind of about our school system here. And I think that this is something that's important. Remember, we got a huge school board election coming up less than a year from now. Okay. So I want to just play this clip and see if we can get a good conversation afterwards.
You know what? We realize what the problem is, and it's not the problem. If you're patient with us, I promise you. One of the things, we have a program called Kill What You Gun. We won't have time to talk about it tonight.
Boy, it's hard to hear, Chuck.
This is tough audio quality. Oh, here it is. This guy talks louder.
Savannah, one of the things we don't like to talk about is the Board of Education has failed in many, many respects. And in the last 6 years, we saw, in the last 6 years, no, I didn't hear it. It's failed. We have too many failed schools. Some of the things that we should be concerned about. In the last 6 years, we saw a huge reduction in this school prison pipeline. Terry Enoch, who's the chief of police and for the Board of Education, did some really, really good things. And that's all been reversed lately. And now we're going back to where we were. And where we were was the second highest referrals to the juvenile justice system in the state. This is not a good formula for trying to fix some of the very problems we are talking about right now. So we need to be aware of it. And I wish there was someone from the Board of Education that that has to be a partner in this. And so sociologists try to look at, we talked a lot about policing, and as has been said, you can't reach your way out of this problem. As sociologists, we look at all of these other things, look at education, look at inequality. Some people talked about poverty, and we know why this happens. People are poor. Well, actually, the correlation between poverty and violent crime isn't what everybody thinks it is. It's a correlation between inequality and crime. And Savannah has a deep coefficient. So
before I play the rest of this,
Dear Dukes,
it almost sounded like Ned Reynolducci, maybe. I don't know who that is. If anybody wants to put in the comments when we publish this who that was, I'd love to know. It might have been both of them. He's 100% correct. And this is even something we're guilty of, John. We kind of use poverty in place of inequality. Okay? Like, it is impossible to have 0% poverty. I believe that. I really do. It's about excess social problems, right? More than the norm, more than the mean, than the average, right? If the nationwide poverty rate is 17 or 13 or whatever,
15.
It's 15, right? If as a city, John, if this city had 15% poverty, fuck boy, they would not know what this place. People would say Savannah done changed. They would say we done changed. You know what I'm saying? Like this would be a paradise at 15% poverty. It's the fact that we're at 27 to 30. That's the problem, right? So it's the inequality. It's the high gross, excesses of social problems.
Effects of that excess. I get it.
Yeah. Let's listen to the last part of this.
A 1 means complete inequality. A 0 means all equality. 0.5 is high. And not only do we have problems with inequality, which is contributing to this, but research shows that when that inequality has a racial component on top of it, it becomes exacerbated. And that's where we are in Savannah. So we need to be thinking about these larger structural things too, as we create these great programs, as we try to support law enforcement. We've got to be thinking bigger.
Yep.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Sir, couldn't agree more. Well said. So many things that were brought up, and it's eerily reminiscent of 2007 when a guy named Michael Burko came from Los Angeles and introduced the Savannah Area Regional Intelligence Center.
All right, so this next clip, John, and I mean, I don't know if you wanted to respond any more to that first part before I play the second part, because this next clip is kind of direct criticism of the police leadership and the mayor. This whole dynamic we've been talking about on these 2 episodes we've been recording, John, about how like the police department chief works for the city manager who works for you. Ergo, like, you know, Nixon fired 3 people in one day to get to the person to do what he wanted to do. It was called the Saturday Night Massacre.
Right.
Okay. Right. You have the power and leverage to say that you don't. It's somewhere between like anemic and just outright lying, depending on your motives, you know?
Okay.
So let's listen to this clip. Look, again, whoever that was, 100% agree about the inequality in the school system. But let's listen to this this criticism of the police department. Go ahead. What did you say, John?
Whoever that was, if somebody can identify him,
let us know. Please do.
We want him to have him on the show and talk more about that.
A little bit more. That'd be great. All right.
Isn't that kind of recreating what you guys are doing? And I have every full confidence in what you're saying and what you intended to do, Mr. Attorney Jones. And you guys seem like you're absolutely committed to the cause to bring that. And the answer in the crime world is obviously intelligence. You've got to know what's going on to predict and prevent. And you can analyze it, prevent, and all that. However, all of these things are great. We tried it before, it didn't work. Do I think your effort will be better and more effective? I absolutely do, and I have every confidence in that. What I don't have confidence in is in our police. And I made the mistake of saying earlier, police leadership. There's some folks here that are in our police leadership. I do not include them. I don't include the deputy chief. I don't include the majors. I don't include that. I am here to talk about what's bothering me the most as far as the police department goes, and that is our police chief. He was brought here to reduce crime, fight crime, all that. He has not done that. He was brought here to repair a police department. He has not done that. He destroyed the police department. He is, like, again, 309 people have left his department. 70 more have been terminated.
What he said there, John, 309 officers have less than 3 years of experience out of a department of 500 and change.
Yeah, we got a rookie department.
That's not good.
No,
it's not good.
Mistakes.
And he says another 70 have signed a letter on telling that the chief, you know, is corrupt and should not work here. Let's keep listening.
Rightly, wrongly, whatever. That's 65% of the police department. I don't want to beat that home too strong, but again. So my question is, and I suppose this is to you, Mr. Mayor, I hate to put you on the spot, but you've already gotten a vote of no confidence from members of his command staff, many of his officers. Human resources of the city substantiated the complaints that have come from that, and the man still sits on top of the police department. How does that happen?
All right, so I mean, it's such a simple question. He goes, this man still sits on top of the police department. How does that happen? I mean, it's like a very plain spoken. Again, this is just an average citizen. I don't know who this is. I thank you for the great question, because this has been a good part of our recordings today, John. You know, the city council is the board of directors of this municipal corporation. The city manager is the CEO. All department heads report to the city manager, right? Like, again, I just break it down for everybody again, okay? If you're Michael Brown, if you're on this city council and you're seeing this police department unfold, you got this guy, a true gamer, Michael Brown, as Van would call him, right, John? He's a gamer. You go to this gamer in executive session and say, look, man, you need to fire the police chief, or we're going to have to let you go right before we hire this new city manager. That's going to be hugely embarrassing for all of us. Nobody wants to do that. So the changes have to be made. Either make the changes, or we'll find somebody who will. You know, it's just that simple. That's power. It's about power.
That's too much chaos at one time for our little system to.
Are you sure though? Let me ask you this: do you think it's better for a brand new city manager to make that firing in the first 90 days of their tenure?
Yeah,
you think that's more chaotic?
I think whoever gets the job is going to be quietly told, do whatever you want with the police chief, but we want action and change. And if that means you want to change out, change out. They're going to get a tacit green light. I just don't think they're going to do it in advance of a hire.
I don't think any city manager in their right mind wants to start off their tenure firing a police chief. Just saying.
Well, listen, I can't.
How much political capital do you have left after that? Not a lot, you know? You can't afford any more mistakes because you've already made a huge major change, a major decision.
Chuck, we know that 4/5, 4 out of 5 on council are already there. Okay, there is a there. And they want.
I think it's even more. I would say that the pressure is building beyond simply 3 or 4 or 5. It could be a majority on council that no longer supports. Matter of fact, Van Brimmer's got a section we'll listen to at the end here about that. Let's listen into the mayor's response, Sean.
Okay, yeah, I'm dying to hear the response.
Answer if you're not comfortable answering. I completely understand.
Not true. So it's a personnel issue. Really good. City manager works with city council, city manager hiring.
Fair enough. And I will tell you this. All right. So I have seen our police chief on the news numerous times saying that nobody will come forth and tell us what's happening.
All right. So before we get into that, that's a separate topic clip we're going to talk about in just a second. Van just repeated the line that we're talking about right here, John. It's a personnel issue. It's up to the city manager. That's just bullshit.
Well, I'm glad you
know. That's what he said to me. He said, first off, well, some of the things you said weren't true, but to address your question, it's a personnel issue. The city manager works for the city council. The city manager hires and fires the police chief.
Well, listen.
John, that does not fly in election time. Let's just be real. That answer does not fly in an election year. It might fly today.
Yeah.
But that answer is not a good answer in an election year. I would encourage the mayor and other candidates to change that.
Do you really think Van is going to somehow stop being autocratic as we enter the election cycle, Chuck?
John, the only way he's going to stop is if members like Alderman Kurtis Purtee start to break away. It's like containment in World War II. We keep thinking if we just compromise that they won't take more. If you're Alderman Purtee, you're like Churchill before you got in the war.
Yeah,
you're just giving away more and more to the opposition because you think that they'll have enough. How many votes do you have to give the mayor to get ShotSpotter in your neighborhood? Is it 2 more Rockingham Farms? Is it 2 more hotel motel deals? Right? How many more deals like this that you're not even 100% comfortable with do you have to vote for with the mayor politically in order to get what you need for your own constituents? Now again, I still agree that I'm so happy you beat Tony Thomas, but that's something Tony Thomas knew, John. Tony Thomas knew I got to bring home some bacon or else I'm not going to have much. You need to learn that. Every alderman in the district level does. And I'll say another thing about the structural dynamic of council. The members of the 5 contain 4 districts and 1 citywide, where the members of the 4 only contain 2 districts and 2 citywides. I mean, there's much more vulnerability in being a district member in the majority than in the minority because you're responsible. You're responsible for the direction of the city. And in your voters' eyes, you should be able to get resources to your district. And if you can't, why are you voting with this majority?
Well, that's exactly what I was trying to express earlier. And that is Kurtis has hitched his wagon to the autocrat Van. And this is the opportunity, the moment for Kurtis to just gently push away, become
some distance. Some distance. Let's listen to this here.
That's one question. So tell me what the police chief has to do with kids shooting each other.
What does he have to do with it, sir?
I want to tell me the correlation between right now, you're actually talking about solutions.
Your very direct correlation of that is the police department's job is to keep the good guys safe from the bad guys. The police chief is the commander of that. And it is the burden of command to make sure that his police officers are trained, equipped, and able to do their job to prevent that crime. And Chief Minner has not done it.
All right, so this guy says a phrase that I love: the burden of command. Okay, you know, and the buck has to stop somewhere. Honestly, they don't even have to fire him, John. Why don't we suspend the police chief for 4 days or 2 days without pay? You know, doesn't that send a message?
Well, that's what I've been saying is that the right next step is to either write him up, suspend him, give him some sort of probation or warning, and see if his behavior and leadership changes. And if it
But
does,
this citizen, let me just say, even though I understand and I am sympathetic to the point that Mayor Van Johnson is trying to say, I understand what you're saying there, Van. I do. You know, it's not like Chief Minner did something in the last week that made it possible for that shooting to happen. Nobody's saying that. But what we're saying is we got a crime wave, right?
well,
We got a police chief who does not enjoy the support of a lot of his own officers. Morale is low. 2/3 of them have no experience. Okay. Whose fault is that over the last 2 years? Right?
actually, Chuck, I think the history of that mass shooting is that 2 nights before there was an incident
There was an incident where shots were fired, but nobody got hit.
at the same place.
Yeah.
So there is some, it's not being beaten, loudly, but people are saying if you just had 48 hours earlier a shooting without injuries, thank God, why wouldn't you have this place on higher patrols? Doesn't the history indicate that something is going to reoccur, and wouldn't you cover that locale at least until things cooled off? And that they weren't, they didn't.
Right. Well, let me just play the last little bit of this, and we'll start to wrap up.
All right.
And he continues not to. He gets up into the public and he says, hey, we need the community's help. We need people to get forward. We need you guys to come forward and tell us what's happening. Chief Lumpkin did the same thing. Everybody, I completely understand that. And knowing from vast amounts of experience, I understand the strength and I understand the need for the community to step up and help. At the point where the community tells you, and this is Savannah, and let me tell you, the streets have, I guarantee you, Mayor, they told you, they told the councilman, y'all do your job. We ain't saying nothing because we live in a community where it's more acceptable to be a murderer than it is to be a snitch. Okay, we live in that community, unfortunately. And my thing is, if the community says, hey, we're not giving you any information, that does not alleviate our city government and especially our police department's obligation to protect our citizens.
All right, so I just want to end there because I don't agree with everything the guy just said, but I want to know, and let me pull up the Van Brimmer podcast again, okay? Because does that logic apply to the police department itself? Okay.
Okay.
All right, Don. I think that there are scenarios where we've had corruption in this police department over the last 20 years. Serious, hardcore corruption. Corruption that landed our police chief in federal prison in the last decade, right?
Yeah.
That stitches get stitches attitude, I think, is prevalent in our city on both law enforcement and criminals.
Have we just set the bar because of that history, Chuck, so freaking low that we're just stuck in the doldrums here? It's like there is no expectation of excellence from the police anymore. And, if you say, well, Minter's great compared to Lovett, that's a true statement, but it sure isn't very helpful or encouraging.
Well, here's the thing, John. The case of William Zachary Harvey was closed out by the GBI last week as well. It's been a huge week for news. That's why we were having to record so long. It's been a huge week for news locally, and you got 5 officers fired involved in this. You got the 2 officers who responded to, who failed to follow procedures is what they're saying. That led to this guy's death. You just can't convince me this man hung himself with a shoestring while his knees were touching the ground. It's like that scene from the end of season 1 or season 2 of The Wire, where Barksdale's little brother gets murdered in prison, and they make it look like he hung himself off the doorknob.
Right.
Like that just doesn't happen. Who does that? I don't think we'll ever know truly what happened to this man, but clearly two men did, and they got fired for their involvement. And, another 3 got fired for making light via a meme of a man hanging himself, just a few days later. So, I am sympathetic to when the chief stands up there and says, we need information on these crime acts so we can get these criminals prosecuted. I'm sympathetic, man, but, I think it starts with your own people too,
Listen, that would be wonderful. How realistic is it? I think is the point here. And it's not realistic given the history of the community. And you can't just go home at that point and do nothing. You have to figure something else out because that's the reality. I'm in my mind, I'm going right back to the Van Brimmer Dowers thing where, very, very correctly, they said, hey, man, this council needs some wins. They need some wins. And I don't see the majority on this council in position to get a bunch of wins. This is a leaky boat taking on water pretty damn fast.
Well, luckily for them, John, they got 2 installments of a President Joe Biden relief package coming, $50-something million. That's certainly going to help. And I can't make a direct correlation between the CARES Act money last year, but I will just point out $2.8 million, hardly any of it went to black-owned businesses. How much of that got through the black community? I don't know.
Chuck, I hope you don't make that mistake again. They couldn't.
If we make, this is going to be it. This year, this 2021 year is the governing year that will decide who gets reelected likely. Okay. I think what happens in this year, governing wise, because it's about what happens next year economically, that will also help determine. And a lot of that's going to depend on what they do. If we do what we did with $2.7 million in CARES Act, with $55 million in American Rescue Plan funds, I think it'll be over for almost all of them that weren't in an opposition to that. Because I will definitely point a direct correlation. I mean, Michael Brown floated a UBI program with some of that money. You got Nehemiah Just demanding $10 million for affordable housing. There are serious demands on this money.
Yeah, which I think told no.
Yeah, I think they were told maybe on $5 million. It's kind of the gist I got from that. That $10 million was a hard no, but 5 was kind of like a maybe. Okay. We'll see. That's kind of the latest I know on that housing demand from Nehemiah Just. But you got the Weekly Time Coalition is demanding $2.5 million be set aside to compensate Salvation Army and buy this property out. Let's go. Let's preserve this land with this money. I think the main restriction on the money from the feds. See, here's the thing too. They're going to start saying there's restrictions on this money, but they're very little. The biggest restriction I've seen is that you can't use this money to reduce taxes, basically, right? You can't just say, okay, well, we got this $50 million, so we're going to reduce property taxes by $50 million. Like, you can't do that, right? I'm pretty sure outside of that, it's pretty much open kimono. There might be 5 or 6 restrictions more. I'll have to read up on it. but don't let any politician telling you that there is, there's holdbacks on any of this money, that's going to prevent them from spending it in any type of way. I think, as I've said to you privately, there's got to be a balance, John. I think we've got to use some of that money to stack sandbags on the city budget for the next year or two in case things get bad, right? One thing I'll give Governor Brian Kemp on was the year before COVID, he made every state department reduce his budget 2.5% to 5%. It was painful, but Chuck, it was prescient. It was prescient.
I'll refer you back to the interview that we just did with Jerry Tolbert. And although this digest is going to be healthy in terms of increase, which means lots of more money for city, county, and schools next year, which is
it's going to be huge.
Yeah,
it's going to price some people out. It's going to price some people out for sure.
Based on 2021, they got a windfall waiting in the wings.
Probably double digits next year.
Absolutely.
Digest growth. I mean, it's been an insane year for real estate. I mean, you've got 10 to 12% year-over-year appreciation in the residential market, John.
Right.
Not to mention the commercial development that's still heavily ongoing here because of all the popular dynamics we've discussed on this show. So let's just listen into a little bit about Bill and Adam talking about the city manager, and then we'll wrap up this broadcast.
Sounds good.
Forms of housing that act.
And then, of course, on top of all of this, comes out Friday that we have 5 police officers that were fired in relation to the in custody death of William Harvey. Now, 2 of them were fired because they didn't follow policy in terms of the interview of Harvey. Harvey was taken into custody to be questioned on an aggravated assault. While he was in custody, he was left alone in an interview room, and it would appear that he hung himself with his shoelaces. So 2 officers were fired over that. 3 more officers were fired because following that incident, one of them got the idea that it would be wise or funny or just horrific to send out a meme via text that showed a hanging. So the 3 people that were involved with that were fired as well. So you have you have the background of people not trusting the police nationally. You have the rash of gun violence here in Savannah that usually comes around this time of year, unfortunately. And you have police being unable to really get information, at least to our knowledge, and at least it's been portrayed that way. They're having a hard time getting information on these shootings. And then you have the backdrop of what has happened here with the Harvey case. What all to you does that say about police trust, and how do we kind of get this thing turned around a little bit?
Well, I mean, just on a political level, as divisive as the city government has been, as divisive as council has been, there's generally been very strong support for Minter and the police.
I just don't know where that statement comes from. I think there's been sniping at Minter since the beginning of this term. I think I don't think that we have a defund the police city council. I don't think there's a big defund the police constituency there, right? I think we have a hold them accountable, reform the staffing levels based on, I think there's some, a little bit of everything. But I don't know what Bill's talking about there. Do you, John?
No, only in the context that setting aside the defund the police movement, if you just look at our context here, the 70 plus officers that wrote, a damning letter to the city manager and city council about the failure of the police chief's leadership, combined with the increasing violent crime rates. In that context, Chuck, I think what he's saying is he probably should have a little more pressure than he's gotten.
Yeah.
But how much more will bring us to a tipping point? He's not certain, but I think he's right to point it out that the guy's using up his 9 lives pretty quickly here.
Yeah, let's listen to some more.
And clearly, I think the public deserves answers to a lot of questions right now. And while it's good to see a strong response in terms of firing people who haven't followed procedures, we need to know more about the incident involving Mr. Harvey. And I think we need to see clearer sort of initiatives to get to the point where the community trusts the police more and aren't afraid to talk about what they know and say what they know about crimes. I think this is going to be an interesting moment for Minter. Chief Minter has been here, for several years now, and he's largely been he hasn't gotten the scrutiny that the previous police chiefs have got. Mm-hmm. I think there's been a little bit of the public's like, okay, let's just give him a break. Let's let him do his thing. We've got other things we want to worry about. Crime is not, spiking as it has periodically over the past 25 years that I've lived here. But now I feel like we really, and this goes back also to, the earlier conversation. We've got a task force that's come out with recommendations. We've got a city council that's supportive. We've got an economy that's on the mend, and city budget bottom line should start looking up, right? What are we going to do? And are we just going to continue to kind of tread water and, deal with these spikes in crime and say a bunch of stuff that, until everything quiets down again? Or are we going to see the police actually launch some new initiatives or find ways to do what they're doing now better and more effectively?
I don't know which of those answers is right. What I do know is that I agree one city manager, one police chief is not going to make a difference. I think there's a totality of things that have to change. But I just want to point out, we're in a semi-decent economic time period. We're coming off a lot of government stimulus.
Right.
Unless things at the bottom of Savannah are that bad, already, maybe that's what it is that the K is just too low and things are getting really, really bad for the bottom 10 or 20%, that are in the poverty numbers, and the desperation is going to continue to sink in. But we have not had real community programs. That fourth bullet point from Kurtis's presentation is Townhall was about how community programming took a huge hit during the pandemic. That is true. That's a true statement, right? We shut everything down. That included the nonprofit sector. They had one of their worst years in 2020 across the board. What do we do from here on out is what's key. And I don't see a solution happening unless there's kind of some bipartisan input from council. I don't think that Kurtis and Nick and Van understand by themselves what's going to solve it, because they haven't worked at the ground level for too long. Van's been a huge political figure. Nick and Kurtis just got here a few years ago, in terms of political. I guess Kurtis has been here like 10 years. But Nick just got here a few years ago. I'm not sure these people come from the social service world as much as Alicia Miller Blakely or certainly Bernetta and Keisha, Gibson Carter, Alderwoman Lanier. They certainly come from that world that's going to solve these issues a lot more than I think the majority does. And I'm just interested that I think there's some consensus building that the police chief has kind of lost respect of the command and of the rank and file, and that the morale's not going to change, and we're not going to change. We're not going to turn the corner on any of these issues with this police chief. I think that's kind of coming to a head soon.
Well, I would say that Minter is on the watch list, and he's a couple events away from being on the no-fly list. So
I don't know if that's the best analogy, but certainly he's a coach on the hot seat for sure. I mean, he's definitely
2 hours into this, Chuck.
I know, man. I was just going to say we should call this here soon, because we've definitely been at it. Again, like I said at the top, I think we'll release this episode as episode 43.
Yeah.
And then we'll release Terry's as episode 44, even though we recorded them in opposite of each other. Again, we're it's summertime, guys. We're trying to take some vacations and still have some content that's relevant to the day for you guys. So I know that these next 2 weeks here, this week and next week, are pre-recorded shows that we did here on Father's Day weekend for you guys. And hopefully we'll be back with a live show maybe after the 4th. That's my birthday. So I think maybe when you get back from California, again, John, we'll record with Chuck Watson, who's on our list. That's Anki Research for you guys. Great Facebook page and research website. So we'll have a fascinating conversation with him, but I think we'll probably pre-record that as well. So that means this week let me check Thursday, the 24th is this episode. Next week we'll post the Terry Tolbert conversation. And then hopefully the following week we'll have Chuck Watson on. And hopefully there'll be no hurricanes by then. Like, that'd be crazy if we had a hurricane going right as that episode was premiering. But I don't want to wish knocking some wood here, that I don't want to wish that on any of us. But again, we appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate your continued support. We're definitely looking forward to the back half of this year, policy-wise and politically wise, as the primaries gear up for 2022. And we've got a special election for East Bloss, John. Is it in November? I think it is.
I think it is.
So please share this content. This is a very long episode, a lot of content in here. We got another great episode coming out next week. Please share this, like the page. If you're listening to us on Spotify or YouTube, you can look at our Facebook page, which is our most followed platform, and give us a like there. We noticed that our audience is growing by a large section in the last few months. We appreciate everybody who's joining in, and whether you're watching this on the live premiere stream or just accessing our page and viewing the video, we appreciate it. If you want to support us, I'm gonna play one of these clips again here on our outro. You can go to www.bettersavannah.org and click donate, join or /donate, and give us a one-time contribution, become a recurring member contributor. Anything you give will help us further the mission of having better policy outcomes here at the state and local level in Savannah. So, John, you got anything else for us?
No, I enjoyed looking after the issues that matter, and I think there's an awful lot of potential flux in the immediate near future. And when I get back from California, it's going to be either totally calm and tranquil, or all hell.
The opposite, no in between. Remember, you got to give us a report on taquerias or taquerias, or what does he call it? How do you say it? Taquerias and dispensaries. Give us a live report while you're out there. All right.
You got it.
So, all right, guys, we appreciate you joining us. We'll talk to you next week.
I appreciate our tourism community. I appreciate our hoteliers.